Okay, so thank you everyone for taking interest in what's happening with our view test utils, because the upgrade was quite painful. It took several months and several commits to the view test utils repository because there were tons of issues. But I still believe that there are a few important things I would share with you. So we have view test utils with 1.1 something version almost everywhere. The last missing piece is the GitLab UI. I forgot about it. I opened the merge request today. Luckily, the changes there are pretty minor. Getting to 1.1 version. Okay, what's changed? In general, the first 1.0 releases when view test utils went out of beta, previously we were using beta release, I believe beta 30 or something, have like three good intentions, and we will quickly discuss how they were implemented. It was that to deprecate things that encourage bad testing practices, to remove certain things when you will be able to do one thing in more than one approach, and also to draw a quite strict border between testing DOM nodes and view components, specifically splitting the find into find and find component, but we will get to that later. Let me remind you that the typical view component is like some box. We should treat it as a black box, which receives data from the props, from Apollo, from Vuex, from provide inject, mentioning quite hot discussions last couple of days. And as an output, it generates the template, which we can check, side effects, which could be, for example, HTTP requests to some endpoints, generating sometimes jQuery events if we are interacting with legacy code, something which is observable outside the component, and obviously generating events. Each component actually has a very quite complex, or sometimes not so complex, but internal structure, which is consists in the three most important parts: is data, computed, and methods. And basically, these are internals of the component. In normal state, we should never run any checks across these things, because if you do that, your test is fragile and it knows too much about how component is implemented, know how it is intended to work. Previously, on view test utils, you have two methods to change existing component methods. One was passing the method's property during mount or shallow mount, and another one was using set methods. Could you set methods on the wrapper, allowing you to dynamically change one or another method. All of these are happily gone in view test utils 1.0 and higher. Right now, there is no official way of changing implementation details of component internals. That means that if you need to stub a method, you should think what you actually do want. For example, I saw a line of the code added 3 days ago, like, hey, we do not have methods, so we will do this one. We will use wrapper.vm .show model equals to just .fn, and we will override the show model method. And this is wrong, because what we want to test is not calling show model method. We want to check that actual model, which was implemented, I believe, as bootstrap model accessed by ref, is called. So if you ever write or see this code on review, this is a red flag. And unless there is a really, really good explanation in the merge request that, hey, this is really needed, this is a very bad code smell from the view test utils perspective. Right now, I have no known use cases when we will not able to mock something and need to do this dark magic. Next one is a couple of minor deprecations, which is that using is for checking for tag name is deprecated. Now you should verify against wrapper.element.tag name. Please take a note that checking against view component is not deprecated. It was originally deprecated in 1.0, but I've made a pull request which undeprecated it. So if you are building some complex logic and sometimes need to check that this thing is an instance of specific view component. For example, this is useful when you use component is for dynamically selecting the component in your template. Is still valid. So don't believe the docs, which says that it is completely deprecated. No, there are two different code paths and doc is outdated. I'm going to submit a pull request in the nearest future to fix it. Another obvious deprecation was dot contains, just use find dot exists. And the last one is empty. Well, I have no idea why they decided that it should be gone, but everywhere in our code base during migration, we use .html equals to empty string. This is a pretty minor and pretty quick to manage. Another one is changing that more could use the string as a stub for your components. So this one will fail. And basically, you just need to wrap it into the template property and pass it as object. So it will be a valid view configuration object. But the better approach is to use stub component helper available in our code base. It's not a part of Vue test-utils, which allows you to specify which component you are stubbing and pass additional configuration to stub. Why it is done in that way? Because if you look to the stub component implementation, which is quite trivial, it has some dark magic, adding magic property, which is specific to Vue test-utils implementation, which allows a very important thing, allowing our test to be more expressive. When you stub the component with this helper and you have this property on the stub, you could use wrapper.find original component and your stub will match this component. Additional, it takes care of most problems which we had during stubs. That means that we are copying props. So your stubs will complain if you are trying to pass invalid data to it. We are copying modal configuration of component. Previously, for example, in GitLab UI, we had multiple issues when Bootstrap Vue components were using change event, and we were using the default model configuration on stubs, which was using input event. Such function as stub component makes sure that we properly copy this thing. And also there are some tiny magic which stubs every method. This is kind of useful if you're stubbing things which expose method in public. For example, any modal implementation has, for example, methods show and hide, which are intended to be called VRFs. And stub component magically makes these methods empty, making sure that no aerial action is performed, but at least your code will not crash, and also allowing you to spy on them. Create stubborn methods is a small helper which makes just.fn for each method specified. So also these 5, which are big, like most often used, now return promise. This promise is nothing more than next tick. So you can just await set props, await set value, await set selected, set checked, set data, and even await triggers. This will also work. As usual in Vue test-utils, unfortunately, there are some trickiness here because set props will always be asynchronous now. This was required to fix certain issues. That means that if you do set props and after that checking the template, forgetting to await that definitely will not work. And this is actually good news. But the rest 4 are actually synchronous. That means that if you observe changes in template, you might see immediate changes, but they should be awaited. I hope we will have linter incoming for this in the nearest future, because you should actually wait for Vue to trigger vouchers and some other stuff. And this is like a fragile point you should be aware of. Always keep an eye that these four are awaited, or otherwise you're not fully testing the component behavior. Obviously, maybe this is intended and you want to perform some checks before some voucher fires, but in general, I would consider this as best practice, so please keep an eye on that. So the last but not least, the big separation between find and find component in the Vue test-utils. Basically, find accepts the CSS selector and always return a DOM node. Same for find all, and its counterparts, which accepts component class, find component, and file all components. Well, this seems pretty logic, but here comes additional troubles. The first trouble is that if you're making search by ref, you are always required to use find component and find all components. Find and find all accepts nothing but CSS selector. The truth is, and I hope this is obvious, that under your ref, it might be probably just a DOM node. And this will make right now Vue test-utils to blow up. And I expect that there will be a broader discussion in the Vue test-utils repository that, hey, the ref might be the component, might be the DOM node, please handle that. But for now, it is not. And the weirdest thing, which seems super confusing during migration, right now you're unable to do this. You can't change find and after that chain it to the find component. Basically, it will work, but it will complain and it will generate deprecation warning. And the reasoning for that was not because, hey, we think that this is no use. The reason for that is quite funny. An official position is, hey, we were not able at the moment to implement this in the Vue test-utils 2, which is the version for Vue 3. So we've decided to deprecate this behavior in the Vue test-utils 1 for Vue 2, just to be consistent. So if anyone will implement this in the Vue 2, we will be happy to deprecate this behavior. And this is what I'm currently working on, because we have tons of such chaining in our tests. I believe there is a lot of important value here, because sometimes we want to search for specific components under specific parts of the template. That's why, for now, these warnings about using find and find component are silenced in our configuration for all three repositories. I mean that currently Vue test-utils will not complain when you use find for searching the component. But if you're writing a new test, it might be a good matter of taste, still not an error. We are going to have kind of automated migration after this issue will be solved to change all our find to find component where it is relevant. And not closely connected to Vue test-utils update, but time to revisit, like what you should keep an eye when you're reviewing or writing the code. Set data, unfortunately, is not deprecated. We still have an ability to set data, which is internal matter of the component on the wrapper. Right now, we have no known use cases to do that. Previously, we did not have the way to test watchers bound to Apollo queries. But thanks to Natalia's work on create mock Apollo helper, now you should be able to test that in the same way like you're mocking the Axios queries. So I have no known use cases for set data. If you know some, please let me know. Or if you're struggling to replace that data with somewhere in your code or in merge request, feel free to ping me. I will be happy to help. So try to avoid it in any cost. Create local view. Thanks, so since we've migrated to Jest, Jest is resetting state of all node modules for each test. That means you are free to use view.use vuex in your test file and it will not pollute any other test environment. It will affect exactly one file. Right now, I believe we have one local view usage. If you use mocking $Apollo, not using create mock Apollo mentioned in the previous point, but using direct $Apollo mock, you might need create local view because view Apollo defines this as a read-only property and will complain when view test-utils will try to reassign that. Set props should be used only to test reactive behavior. So keeping the component across the tests is a bad anti-pattern, and you should always destroy your component after the test. And also, I've checked, there is less than 10% difference in performance even on our longest tests on that. So this could not be even a performance optimization. And the last but not least, and even I believe the most important, is that every time you're writing .vm .something, it is bad. It is ultimately bad, and the only valid thing you could call on .vm is $emit when you are stubbing components, or you just find component and you want to emit specific event. Unfortunately, in Vue 2, we have no way to verify that this event is correct. This will be fixed in Vue 3 with emits property on the components. But in general, please never write .vm .anything, no matters in expect or making an assignment to put component in some kind of required state. Please use external interactions, like putting something to template, putting something to emitting some events from components rendered in template to move component to the state under test. This will really help keeping our code base, first of all, not fragile. And second, I really believe that this will simplify future upgrades of Vue test-utils, because right now this is a very huge effort each time because of so many quite dirty hacks in our code base. Well, I believe this is all what I wanted to share. And if we have any questions, I will be more than happy to discuss.
Ilya,
yeah,
sorry, no, I'll wait. You go.
Ilya, thank you for the presentation. I was just to double check about the warning about the usage of chained methods, find and find component. Is this suppressed for now, or is the usage of find for to search for components suppressed?
If you use chain on find and you will call find component, you will receive a warning. For now, if you chain just finds, and one find is searching for CSS and second is chaining for component, you will not receive warning. Warning will be triggered only if find component will appear in chain.
Okay, so we cannot change them. Okay, that makes sense. And I have another question about set data. Did you fix all the occurrences in our code base of the usage of set data? Because we use it
No, this is like enormous amount of set data calls in the code base, enormous amount of direct assignment on wrapper.vm. We have an epic for improvement our tests. I will probably share that in the Slack right after the call. But this is a technical debt, and this is a very huge effort. I estimate it like maybe 2 or 3 times bigger of effort we've had for upgrading Vue test-utils, which meant removing all that deprecations. So please do not introduce a new code and fix an old one when you have opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks again, Ilya, for the talk. It was good. I have 2 questions, and one of them is in multiple parts, so bear with me. With the stub component helper that you mentioned, which I wasn't aware of, it's quite neat. There was a comment saying that it only renders the default slot, whereas VTU renders all slots. So this is the first part of this question is, can we render all slots in this helper? What's stopping us from doing that?
It is, well, actually, this was kind of intentional because we could, if we remove this one, there will be certain tests failing in our code base because the previously Vue test-utils behavior on rendering slots and scope and slots was inconsistent. I believe, and right now, as a safety measure, we've decided to go with this approach, and I believe you could render all slots, but this will require passing a quite hacky option. So passing the render function there, which will just render all slots. And I'm not super happy about it. This is, if not mentioned, I will add it to Epic right after this call. The best approach would be to fix that several crashing issues in our code base, where basically the scoped slots we're trying to access unexistent values on the scoped slot value, and to remove this hack. But for now, where we are using the stub component, we are passing the explicitly like template saying, hey, please render this slot, and this slot. So for now, explicitly, and I hope this will change in future, but this is a bit tricky. Some code parts were pretty complex and not obvious for me, and it was already delaying upgrade a lot.
Cool, thanks. And the other part is, I thought that VTU doesn't actually render all slots, especially when you use the new 2.6 slot format syntax, I mean.
This is exactly what I was speaking about, inconsistent behavior. Their intention, and I could reference that as commits to V2, was to do that. But right now it is kind of broken, and actually it depends on, previously it was doing very terrible thing. It was passing the null to the any scoped slot property, and it was silently crashing somewhere. Right now it is fixed because they are passing empty object if you're not two scoped slots on the component, and that means that certain slots could be rendered and certain slots could be not. That's why it was originally introduced here, because well, it is better than to have this surprise inconsistency. So yes, the V2 has a very troublesome slots rendering for now, but the original intention was to render all slots, but it is broken in certain situations.
Cool. And my last question is to do with the create local view on a later slide. You said that it's a use cases when you are mocking $Apollo. Can you go into a bit more detail about what you mean by that? Is that like where you pass the mocks property to?
Exactly. When you pass as mocks property, and mock in the mocks properties there is $Apollo, and you've done view use view Apollo, it will complain that, hey, $Apollo property is read-only. So since Vue test-utils is doing direct assignment instead of object-defined property which allow us to overwrite it, it will fail. I'm not 100% sure if it is intended behavior or we should fix this in view test-utils, because from my point of view, having to explicitly set property via defined property is good. At least, hey, come on, I'm explicitly saying I want to mock this. But let's see what maintainers of view test-utils will say.
And one quick follow-up question. What's the use case for mocking $Apollo rather than using create mock Apollo?
I was using that, for example, since I was doing the dynamic queries by calling $Apollo.query, and it was dynamically generated in the code. So it's not a pre-built .graphql file. And it was extremely complex to mock this with create mock Apollo. So I was capturing the $Apollo query call and verifying that I've made correct calls and explicitly returning values from there.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for great questions, and sorry that half of them was complaining about V2 specifics.
I just had a quick question about find component. So can you clarify, can you use find component with a ref, or should you use find if you're using a ref?
You can use find component as a ref if your ref is bound to the component. Okay. If your ref is bound to the DOM node, it will blow up.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. If we have no questions, we are exactly on time. Thanks everyone for participating. Thanks for great questions. I will post this recording to the GitLab Unfiltered and share a link to front-end channel alongside with the epic, big epic, how we could make our view tests better. And thanks everyone. Have a good day.